All right, so today I'm going to be doing a review of Curse of the Mistwraith by Janny Wurts. And in this review, I want to, well, first and foremost, tell you who Janny Wurts is, what these books are about, and then further into the video, I'm going to get into some of the minutia of the characters, the plot, the concepts, the themes that Janny is trying to convey in this work. So, first, I'm going to give you a brief description of who Janny Wurts is as a person, what her work includes, and just kind of who is Janny. The Wars of Light and Shadow is the magnum opus of author Janny Wurts, born Jeanette Inglis, December 10th, 1953. Janny was born in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania in the 1980s. She worked as an illustrator for role-playing game supplements for Mayfair Games. She has served as a cover illustrator for multiple books. She worked with Raymond E. Feist. This series, The Wars of Light and Shadow, is an 11-book epic and, according to Janny herself, is her magnum opus and her greatest achievement in literature. And having read book one, I could not agree more. I'd be very hard pressed to believe that fiction could get better than this. Second, I'm going to go over the premise of the book, and I believe that this is perfectly encapsulated in the prologue of the story. Um, it's going to follow right after this, but it's essentially the wars of light and shadow have already been fought, and we're following historians as they go back to kind of give an objective accounting of the war, but it's also hinted that Lysair won the war, or if you know, history is written by the victors, so it led me to believe that Lysair may win, or at least in the history of Althera, this half brother Lysair is believed to be, the rightful, the morally right character. So we're now going to get a glimpse into kind of Arathon's side of the story, but it's kind of like everyone's side of the story. The Wars of Light and Shadow were fought during the Third Age of Aethera, the most troubled and strife-filled era recorded in all of history. At that time, Arathon, called Master of Shadow, battled the Lord of Light through 5 centuries of bloody and bitter conflict. If the canons of religion founded during the period are reliable, the Lord of Light was divinity incarnate, and the Master of Shadow a servant of evil, spinner of dark powers. Temple archives attest with grandiloquent force to be the sole arbiters of truth. Now, I've heard a lot of people compare these books, the Wars of Light and Shadow as a series, to Malazan Book of the Fallen. And I've also seen comparisons to Robin Hobb's Realm of the Elderling, two of my favorite series of all time. If you know me, Malazan Book of the Fallen is my favorite series of all time, and Robin Hobb is my favorite author of all time. Um, so to hear a lot of comparisons to those two, I was very intrigued to check out Janny Wurts. And looking at her bibliography, I usually start with the first published book, but I saw all the praise heaped on The Wars of Light and Shadow, and I was very intrigued. I also heard about it about the same time I was reading Carcanus, which is a prequel to Malazan Book of the Fallen, and has a lot to do with like the Tisti Andi, which is like the children of night and the children of light. And I felt like it had a lot of similar themes to what I was reading at the time, or at least that's what I was hearing. And I also heard that her prose style is very similar to Erickson. And I would say yes, Toll the Hounds is probably my favorite prose I've ever read in my life. And Curse of the Mistwraith honestly gives that a run for its money. And this is the first book in her series. Erickson, I had to get through several books before I felt that his prose style was elevated to the point of being my favorite of all time. And I think that only bodes well for later on in the series because I found most practiced authors only get better with each subsequent release. Um, Now, this style, I will say, is not for everyone. Her prose style is very brilliant. It's very Shakespearean, is a word I see thrown around a lot, but I think her style will both be a lot of people's favorite and least favorite thing about these books. And it's important to go into the Wars of Light and Shadow with the expectation that this is going to be very archaic language, that the prose are going to be very eloquent, very verbose at times, but other times not. It's not overly descriptive. That's not what it is. It uses the correct amount of words to convey each feeling and emotion that Janny is trying to convey. Um, she's very expert in using the perfect amount of description, but saying a lot more than it at first appears she's saying. Now, I've also seen a lot of reviewers claim that this is very classical fantasy, and I do agree with that. I believe that this series is very similar to the works of J.R.R. Tolkien in the tone and in the wonder and in the magic of the series, but it does not. It doesn't have a lot of the aesthetic qualities that a lot of Tolkien clones have. Instead of elves, dwarves, hobbits, you have the Paravians, which is a very interesting race, and I absolutely love the concept of the Paravians and this lost divine race that they have. So there are three different races of Paravians, and that's a big plot point within the series is trying to where they went, what happened to them. So the three Pravian races of Athera are the centaurs, the unicorns, and the sun children. Now that's one of the big mysteries is figuring out where they went, what they are, what happened to them. These Pravians do have a very divine feeling, similar to the elves. It evokes a lot of the same feelings you might get of these, almost divine creatures, but they still feel very distinct from elves. Now, been a lot of talk about the themes of the series. What is it actually about? So this follows two princes, two half brothers, Lysair Seleucid and Erathon Cephalon, and they're each princes of different parts of the splinter world Desen Elur. And the story follows them after a war between their people. Erathon is the prince of this pirate-like nation, uh, and then Lysair is the son of the Duke of Amroth. Terrible father, by the way. But anyway, so these two princes are then exiled to through the World End Gate, and this brings them to the continent of Athera on the planet Paravia. Um, and once they get to this other world is really where the story sets off. They're found by a wizard named Sandir and told that they are destined to defeat the Mistwraith and return the sun to Athera. And this is kind of what we follow. That may seem very classical fantasy, off on a quest, very, been there, done that. But Janny is able to weave a lot of twists into the plot. And I think biggest, the biggest draw to Janny's books, aside from her very well constructed prose, are her phenomenal characters. I believe this series probably began with the conception of Erathon as a character. Damn you, said Erathon in a shattering change of mood. He was laughing. You have it. What's my word against the grandiloquent predictions of a maudlin and drunken prophet? Maybe everything, Valerian finished gently. You're too young to live without dreams. Erathon, to me, is her best character, hands down, in this series. He's so nuanced, and he reminds me a lot of Fiddler from Malazan Book of the Fallen. He reminds me a lot of Fitz, especially in the earlier books of The Realm of the Elderlings, which are two of my favorite characters ever in the history of fiction. So yes, Erathon will probably be joining them soon, the further I get into this series, which I've only read book one so far. Now, Erathon is the Master of Shadow and the prince of the son of the pirate king on Desen Lur. He's a bastard prince. His mother is also Lysair's mother. He's the younger brother, and she left the Duke of or not the Duke of Amroth, the King of Amroth, and had a child with this pirate lord, and that's how Erathon got here. Now, one of the core facets of Erathon's character is his love for music, and that contributes a lot to this duality of, does he choose to be a leader for his people, or should he choose to embrace his freedom and his artistic vision and become a bard or a musician or a lyranth player, lyranthy. Anyway, so that contributes a lot to his character, and I think he's just very nuanced. Anytime he picks up an instrument in this series, you can just feel all eyes on him, and it's like the story comes to a complete standstill. All right, so a character that did not work for me in this book, which I think he might be supposed to work for you. It might not. I don't. I think Janny knew in writing this that Lysair would be everyone's least favorite of the two brothers. But Lysair Celested, in the first few hundred pages, I kind of wanted to root for both brothers. But so Lysair, I believe, is suffering from multiple different traumas. Um, and one of those being that his mother left, and this was through no fault of his own, and had to do with his own father. These are all things you find out very early on. I'm keeping this as low spoilers. Most of this is stuff you can find in the synopsis, but you know, each of their two lines, the Lysair and Erathon both, they both hail from royal lines on Athera, and they're each cursed or blessed with a Geos. Erathon's is a Geos of empathy. He has a nonviolent disposition, and he's overcome with the feeling of empathy, even to the worst humanity has to offer. Erathon is able to empathize with them. Lysair is the pure opposite of that. He sometimes feels like he has no empathy at all. Other times he feels like he does. He does empathize with characters at some points, but his Geos is justice. So he's kind of like the law is king. He is lawful neutral, I'd say, or maybe even lawful good. But it's his sense of ethics is what the law says. He doesn't have a lot of empathy for the downtrodden because, the law lifts up those in power. So he doesn't see them as equal. So his ethics are very much compromised by his Geos of justice. Now, we have side characters aside from the two princes. One character we only get briefly is Lysair's father, the King of Amroth, which is just a despicable father, one of the worst fathers in fiction. Absolutely awful. We have a Sandir from the Fellowship of Seven, who is bothered by his own qualms about being manipulative. Like he has these machinations and these manipulations that he uses to make the world a better place, to restore Athera to its former glory. And sometimes Janny makes it very well known throughout the book that he does have some inner conflict with the choices he makes. Now, aside from Asandir, another major character from the Fellowship, while not being a member of the Fellowship, he's the apprentice to Asandir, is Dakar, which would be one of my favorite characters if he didn't have this kind of weird aversion to Erathon, this weird hatred towards Erathon. But aside from that, he is often a source of he's a source of levity in the story. There's a lot of times where he's the butt of the joke, or he'll be the one making the joke. But usually, if the times I would chuckle in this book were the result of a scene involving Dakar in some way. Now, another character that I think will be very important going forward is Alera, which she's one of the sorceresses in this story, and her duality with what her sorceress leaders, the leader of her sorceress group, the duality of what they want for her, and her trying to submit to this authority and be who they want her to be, but also her wanting to go her own way and have her own freedoms, and establishing her own sense of self, is a duality that is only briefly explored in this book, but it's hinted at that there will be a lot more from Athera in the future, not Athera, Alera in the future. And then some other highlights for me were Jarret and Halaron. Halaron especially, I think, is going to be one of my favorites of this entire series. But only time will tell. And I do think this series has the potential to be one of my favorites of all time. But I'm very intrigued to see where it goes. Very atypical to what was coming out at the time, and it's very atypical to what we have now. And I've been seeing it get a lot of love on YouTube. Janny Wurts has been doing a lot of interviews with different YouTubers. YouTubers have been reviewing this series especially. And I do want to read more Janny, but I think instead of checking out her solo works and her Empire trilogy, I might just go all the way through this series and then go back and check out the rest of her bibliography. I'm just very much in love with the character of Erathon. He's one of my favorite bard-like characters I've read in a long time. And if you're like me and you've read Name of the Wind and you really loved Kavoth's section with his instrument, um, This, while saying a lot less in those scenes and being less descriptive than Rothfuss, was able to evoke the same emotions in Kavoth in Arathon as was conveyed with Kavoth in his musical scenes. But I just think Arathon is so much more layered than Kavoth, and that's even with, you know, Name of the Wind is a first-person narrative, and it has beautiful prose, just like Janny. But I just feel like there's so much to this character of Arathon, and I've only gotten, the top layer. And yeah, I'm just really excited to continue her series and to continue this journey with Arathon and Lysier. But all right, if you have any recommendations or any thoughts on Janny Wurts as a writer or her books or any, leave it down in the comment section below. Please like and subscribe. Peace.